Hi, everybody out there, our podcast followers. A quick message from me, Laura. We believe in covering people and practices that are pulling us together to build a more fair future. And we hear every day from people that programming like this is important to them. So we are in the midst of a May Day fund drive. As non-commercial, not-for-profit media, we don't spend as much as the other guys, but we don't have as deep pockets either. We rely on you. So what do you say? Are you ready to pitch in to expand the support base for reporting about possibility and love? Or to let the drone of commercial cynicism take over even this space in the airwaves? Please donate now at lauraflanders.org/donate and spread the word. Thanks. Here's this week's show. Hi, I'm Laura, and this is the Laura Flanders Show, a TV and radio program that shines a light on the solutions of tomorrow today. We report on the people and movements driving systemic change from the worlds of politics, arts, and entrepreneurship. Welcome. Low wages, precarious jobs, towns with shuttered main streets and bleak futures. Is there an alternative to the sort of begging and pleading we see some cities and towns engage in just to tempt outside employers to invest in their people? Remotely owned corporations rarely stay long after the tax incentives they receive run out, and the climate clock is ticking on how much slash and burn our neighborhoods can take. So here's the good news. In some parts of the world, local governments are experimenting with a local investment approach that's paying off and gaining traction around the world. Community wealth building, it's called, and it's even included in the U.S. National Strategic Plan. We at the Laura Flanders Show have been following the story for a while. It's taken us from Cleveland, Ohio, to Preston in northern England, and today we're going to go even further afield. With public health, democracy, and climate mission critical, is now liftoff time for community wealth building at a whole new scale. For that conversation, I welcome back Ted Howard, co-founder and president of the Democracy Collaborative, India Pierce-Lee, a member of the board of trustees of the Collaborative and senior vice president at the Cleveland Foundation, and Neil McEnroy, whom we last saw when he was heading up the Center for Local Economic Strategies, or CLES, in the United Kingdom. He's now the Community Wealth Building Advisor to the Scottish Government and a colleague of Ted's. Welcome, everybody. It is a pleasure to have you with us. And I'm going to start with you, Ted, just one more time. Tell us what community wealth building is.
Well, a good way to think about it is to look at what kind of economic development do we have now in our cities and our states. And it really is something that began about 40 years ago. And to put it in a nutshell, it's called trickle-down economic development. And the idea there is if places just focus on growing the economy, the benefits will trickle down to everyone. But the reality is that doesn't happen. And so community wealth building is really a different approach to economic development. It uses the assets a city has and leverages them, or a state has, for the benefit of the residents.
So India, coming to you, just to fill people in a little bit on Cleveland. I mean, I was there, I guess, for the Republican convention. Let's not talk about that experience. But I was shocked by the state of the city, actually. You think of Detroit, you think of Flint. I hadn't realized quite what shape much of Cleveland was in. Can you just describe the challenges your precious city was facing, or is facing still?
We have all the, disparities, I think, but what people have finally begun to acknowledge since 2020 that a lot of us have been fighting for decades is that understanding the root causes of every issue is tied to systemic and institutional racism. I mean, we talk about wealth building, we talk about building equity, we talk about disinvestment, but then we have to look at the policies, the practices that have, plagued the redlining in our communities that have caused this, decades and decades. And now we're trying to, swim our way out of it.
Cleveland's model of local investment in community wealth building helped to inspire Matthew Brown, the leader of a similarly deindustrialized city across the Atlantic in Preston, England. I had a chance to talk with Brown in 2018.
To be honest, I read about a lot of it on the internet and I thought, well, is that happening in America? Because the perception of the American economy is often, I didn't realise things like that were happening in America. Linking what the public sector buys to having jobs which are democratic and in the ownership of the people who live within the community, I thought was really, really appealing. We started by going around 6 of our large anchor institutions. So initially we got them to commit to things like paying a living wage, but also shifting more of what they buy to the local economy. So that's initially supported a lot of local businesses. So the £75 million, which in 2016-17 was redirected towards Preston-based suppliers. What we're finding is that there's more people receiving the living wage. We're now the best in 14 district areas in Lancashire for people receiving £8.75 an hour or more, but also things like the amount of jobs that are in the local economy. We're now one of the best in Lancashire for the amount of jobs that are in the local economy compared to the amount of people who are within that local economy.
These models of community wealth building are interesting because they are scalable and they're clearly spreading. Most recently, on the west coast of Scotland, a few hundred miles north of Preston, the North Ayrshire Regional Council has picked up the idea as an alternative to some of the tourist-driven trickle-down economics that's brought them this far. Neil, you were one of the advisors on that project. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's been happening in North Ayrshire?
Surely. North Ayrshire is a very typical sort of post-industrial location on the west coast of Scotland, and it suffered under 2 main problems that community wealth building addresses. Firstly, the traditional regeneration or revitalisation, as you call it, in the US, that payments to poor people to solve their issues, that didn't seem to really dig right into the problems that those people were facing. And then as Ted mentioned before, the problems of economic development, this trickle-down economics. Let's get the factories in, let's get the investment in, and then we'll have a land of milk and honey. So both revitalisation was failing, but also the traditional economic development model. And through enlightened leadership in North Ayrshire, we've seen a comprehensive strategies to develop community wealth building across many fronts, in terms of public spending, in terms of workforce and workplace advancements, in terms of land and property and ownership of land and property, in terms of different forms of finance and how we use them effectively in the new ecosystem, and also in terms of the progressive procurement and spending of public sector resources in that locality. A suite of activities which seek to address this enduring problem of wealth and the extraction of wealth.
Joe Cullinan, a member of the Scottish Labour Party, recently won re-election in North Ayrshire with community wealth building as a focus of his campaign. In 5.5 years under his party's leadership, the council invested in council-owned solar farms and wind turbines built on an old waste dump, a community investment fund, and a large new house building program. This spring, Cullinan showed Ted Howard around the building site for those new homes.
Okay, so this is a housing development, Ted, here in Irvine Harbour side. There's 73 council houses getting built here. It's part of the total house building programme, so 1,625 council houses. Every development will have a range of sort of sustainability measures. Solar panels will kind of be the standard one, so as well as doing it on the new builds, we are retrofitting our existing housing stock with solar panels to kind of improve their energy efficiency and reduce tenants' energy bills. But there'll be a range of other sustainability measures in some of the houses as well.
Well, Ted, coming back to you, in Scotland, as you saw, the Ayrshire Growth Deal, as it's known, is on track to create thousands of new jobs over the next decade, and millions of dollars in public and private funds are slated for local investment in community wealth building. Coming back to the US, where cities like Cleveland and others have faced year upon year of cuts to public spending, where does the money for community wealth building, for the investment, come from?
Well, there are a number of resources, Laura, to be invested in our community. On one hand, as we did, India and I and others in Cleveland, we worked with and persuaded what we call anchor institutions, large hospitals, universities, and so forth, to change their supply chain requirements so that they could buy locally. So you could have hundreds of millions of dollars being spent by these large institutions. But you look in the community and nobody in the community is getting a penny of it. So the strategy was, let's look at all of our contracts coming up. Where are we buying goods and services, laundry services, food, energy, everything else? And how can we bring those investments, those spending back to the community? After all, the institutions have to buy anyway. Why not buy locally where they're rooted and can't leave, and improve the community overall in the spirit of we're all in this together, the community and the anchor institution? More recently, cities and now the federal government are beginning to invest in community wealth building. The city of Chicago has just a few months ago announced the first $15 million pilot investment of COVID relief funds that's going into a community wealth building model. Other cities are similarly changing their budgets. So New York City has a line item to support cooperative development right within the city's budget. And most recently, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the biggest funder of economic development in the United States, $68 billion budget this year, has built community wealth building for the first time into their new 4-year strategic plan. It's very early days, of course. The money hasn't yet started flowing through the Department of Housing and Urban Development for this. But the kinds of things that we're talking to them with is they award many hundreds of millions of dollars to grants, to cities, to nonprofit organizations, to anchor institutions, and reshaping what that funding now goes for.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. My guests are India Pearce-Lee, Ted Howard, and Neil McEnroy, who are all dedicated to the idea of community wealth building. They're colleagues at the Democracy Collaborative, which calls itself an economic research and development lab. Howard is president and co-founder. Pearce-Lee is a member of the board of trustees. And Neil McEnroy is senior global advisor. He also serves as a community wealth building advisor for the Scottish government. And Pearce-Lee is the senior vice president of the Cleveland Foundation, a community foundation which worked with Ted Howard to develop the comprehensive job creation and wealth building strategy which resulted in the evergreen co-ops in that city. We reported on the Cleveland project in a special report back in 2018. You can search for that episode in our archives and watch on YouTube, along with all our reports on economic alternatives. Go to lauraflanders.org for more information. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter, which hooks you up with our streaming events and web extras, including my upcoming podcast release of the full uncut conversation from today's show and my commentaries. Next, can this model of community wealth building address the deeply entrenched racial injustice and systemic racism in our towns and cities? And is there a danger of localism like this becoming isolationist? But first, here's Oxygen by Jaleesa Anderson from her forthcoming album Wild Orbits, courtesy of Dorado Records.
Consciously, don't you see, I am here finding a resting place. Not afraid when you say nothing, reforming your words from what you heard in your head. It's getting louder. It's getting louder. Fill the zone, turn the light, waiting something new to take flight. Fill the zone, turn the light, waiting something new to take flight.
India, can this model address like deeply entrenched racial injustice, segregation, racism?
Have the right people leading that, one, put the right policies in place. And then also, how do we leverage the funding in a way? So we've been at this work now about 17 years. And, over time, we have continued to evolve it, new partners. But what has culminated from this, again, unfortunately, it took all the events of 2020 to get people to really, really dig deep on this work. But then getting people to acknowledge that you have to pay people what they're worth, right, to create the kind of wealth. We have this glut now, people leaving jobs and not coming back. We need to acknowledge that people need the same basic human needs. It's not about a right. It should be that's everything for everyone: healthcare, good housing, good public school systems. But really looking at how we democratize and educate our community so that they have ownership in the community. And we're doing, some of those things on a small scale, but it's starting to take hold not only here, but across the country, creating a land trust. We have a Black Futures Fund that we created to support small nonprofit, Black-led organizations doing great work in the community, touching the people where they are. But it also means that we have to change the way we do business. We have to figure out how we build and share power, how we listen to people on the ground and co-create with the individuals we're working with to make the kind of changes that benefits them and not us telling them what they need. One of our first employees with the co-ops actually came to us and said, he was a father of 5, he had just got divorced, and needed somewhere to have his kids. So he said, what about helping us get housing? So we looked at various models and worked with the local nonprofit Cleveland Housing Network, now Cleveland Housing Partners, who is the largest producer of affordable housing in the state of Ohio. And when they came to us, talking about after the crash in 2008, they began self-financing. I said, we're trying to do this with Evergreen. So we gave them resources to administer a housing program so employees of the co-ops could actually buy a home and own it in 5 years.
If the planet can keep living and breathing long enough, and there are implications for sort of community wealth-built Green New Deal in this moment too. Neil, India, who wants to speak to this? In what way can community wealth building, or is it already, helping our transition to a more sustainable, greener economy? Neil?
Well, clearly, community wealth building, part of its strategy is to shorten our supply chains for goods and services, and that helps with our carbon footprint. So we need to repatriate elements of our economy, opposed to having these long supply chains that spin around the globe. It's also worth saying that we are seeing in a number of places in the UK and Europe and in the States, and we're seeing a distributed energy network, which is much more localizing our energy systems from wind and so forth, particularly in Scotland, which is actually creating a more immediacy. We produce the energy nearer where we actually are using it. So that's very important. I think what is key about community wealth building is it nestles, if not snuggles, within a wider transformation approaches to our economy that makes the transition. And the key heady brew, if you like, would be community wealth building combined with a green industrial strategy, which Scottish government is moving towards. So those big industrial transition questions is aligned with community wealth building strategies. Again, we're at the foothills of this, but certainly the thinking is there, the movement's starting to grow. We just need to move a bit faster.
Well, Ted, how do you head off the danger that the kind of localism you're talking about, increases segregation possibly or deepens it?
That's a really good question, Laura. And of course, our country is so beset by this problem. I have a faith what we're talking about is not going to exacerbate that problem. Community wealth building at its core is something that calls to people, we're all in this together. It's very inclusive. the evergreen cooperatives began in a very democratic city led by a Democratic mayor, right? It's interesting that one of the very first replications of our evergreen cooperative laundry is down in the Panhandle in Texas, in Amarillo, which, having visited there, it's about the reddest place I've ever been. There are no Democrats elected officials, but they say, this just makes sense. Our hospitals, our laundry is being trucked even out of state to be cleaned. Let's build a local facility. Let's move it toward employee ownership, hire people in the most disadvantaged neighborhoods, and keep our money local. So I think there's something in the spirit of this that, frankly, can appeal to both liberals and conservatives. And it's really about making a place for our community and making it a healthy place. And as India was saying, not just economically, but really for the whole person. And I think that's got to be a contribution to this country and where it's going.
I was very impressed, Neil, by some of what I heard about how Preston had fared during COVID. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, because there's, in many areas, including Preston, because there's a high percentage of the economy is relational and cooperatives and those other democratic enterprises. When COVID hit, there was an affinity to the place, to the people, and also there was not the huge extraction of profits that come from shareholder dividends in some of those enterprises. So the incentives were more resilient into that particular shock. And I think there's lessons there, that the types of economy, the type of economy we're talking about is one that is in tune more with the people, in tune with society, in tune with the problems they face. And it doesn't make the short-term shareholder profit decisions. It makes interests for the longer term. So there's something quite powerful about that community wealth building in terms of the spirit of what an economy is. And of course, the word economy comes from the Greek word oikonomos, keeper of the household. It's something that should be close to our hearts, close to our homes. The economy is, at the end of the day, it's a social construction, and we can construct it any way we want. And we're just talking here about making an economy that works for us. Hey, simple stuff.
What do you think is at stake, India, and why do you care so much about this?
Well, I think that, at stake are the people. If we do not fix this issue, if we do not get together and solve this, we're going to continue to see the kind of poverty, the disinvestment, the continued, the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer, and this is just unacceptable. It's everyone has the right to the same opportunities, and it's up to us to make sure that we're out here advocating, taking the resources we have where we sit to leverage that to really make a difference in people's lives. At the end of the day, I used to tell people I only have this much space in the little space I live in. I want to help as many people as I can while I can. And, and that means, finding people like Ted, like Neil and others that are willing to stand up to fight the systems that exist, that continue to disincentivize, that, really takes away the opportunity to deepen civic participation from our citizens.
I often end these programs by asking our guests the following question, and I'll ask it to you, Ted, first, but everybody, what do you think is the story the future will tell of this moment?
I think this is a true watershed moment. And there are key times in our lifetime, 1933 in the United States when the New Deal came into force. In the United Kingdom, 1945, right after the war, and the advent of the Labour government and the building of the National Health Service. And in a, I would think, a kind of negative way, in 1979 and 80, when this neoliberal doctrine came in to dominate so many economies all over the world. And, a situation where three people in the United States control more wealth than the bottom 160 million of us, that's a prescription for tearing the country apart. And I think we've seen some of that in recent years. So I think this could be a watershed moment where 40 years of a certain way of dealing with the economy over time is put to bed, and we build a new economy based on the democratic principle of ownership and participation. So while the times are perilous, I'm very hopeful of where we're going.
And you, India?
I'm always the optimist, and I believe that, we have enough good people that will make the kind of changes that we're looking for. And again, looking at opportunities to build on work that we've been doing for the last, 17 years here at the foundation. We are starting the land trust finally, Ted, things like that put wealth in people's hands. And when we go out to community now to like where we're building our new headquarters, engaging the community in a way, but paying them for their time, paying them for their advice, letting them know that they're important and that they are, part of this process. And I think the solution is just us sticking together and continuing to fight the fight.
I mean, Neil, I have to say, the progress has been pretty quick with community wealth building. I mean, we're not talking centuries to gain some traction, but decades, not even very many.
No, it's not glacial. In fact, we need to go faster for sure, because we've got a huge climate crisis as well as the whole other series of injustices that are taking place. But we need to seize the moment. And I think from community land trusts in Chicago, from municipal ownership of energy, to a whole series of different examples that fit into this community wealth building sort of framing. We need to learn those, and we need to sing about them, and we need to go again and harder and faster. I think we need to seize this moment, but it's not worth seizing the intangible. It's all around us in many of our communities. We just need to get it to grow. And I think what's exciting about what's happening in many cities of the US, but also in Scotland, is that we're seeing administrations starting to pick up on this. We're seeing HUD in the US picking up on this. This could make it go a lot faster. As soon as we get that mainstream state apparatus supporting this, then we can go faster. So I think we're at the beginning, but we're just about to take off. That's my hope.
We just need Beyonce to record a song.
We do. Some high profile celebs getting behind community wealth building would be great stuff.
All right, if you're out there, anybody, just contact the folks at the Democracy Collaborative, I think is the answer. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure to catch up with each of you and all of you together. Ted Howard, India Pierce Lee, and Neil McElroy. It's really a pleasure. I enjoyed it very much. And I will be back in just a minute with just a few closing thoughts. It hasn't been all smooth sailing for community wealth building around the world. In Scotland, Joe Cullinan won re-election this spring, but his party, the Scottish Labour Party, lost the majority on the council. So now they'll be working for community wealth building from opposition. But Neil McElroy says the Scottish government and all the parties in the region are pretty persuaded of the benefits of the idea. We'll see how it goes. In the US, there's been tremendous growth too, from that original $5.8 million put into Cleveland's first evergreen cooperative laundry. We're now looking at a federal budget of $68 billion at HUD, some of which is tagged to go into community wealth building. More than anything, though, it's not just the money, it's the meaning that community wealth building gives to people in a place that I've seen make a difference. In Preston, for example, during COVID, people realized they could really help one another when they were in need. They've gone from thinking about themselves as a place lacking in resources and investment, lacking in what they needed, to a place looking at what they actually had and have where they are and how that can make a difference. And that, it seems to me, is an investment worth making, shifting people's spirits as much as shifting their economy. And with community wealth building, well, perhaps you can do both at once. For more information on this week's guests, along with a suggested reading list and links to related episodes to explore, check out our episode reading and research post at patreon.com/The LF Show. That's also where you'll receive an invitation to watch the premiere of each week's show on YouTube with me and chat live in real time. Every Sunday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. All the details are at patreon.com/The LF Show. That's also where you can become a beloved Patreon partner of this program, for which you get early access to all of our audio extras and uncuts. The show is crowdfunded, not funded by corporations or big businesses, which leaves us free to do reporting like this, which really gets to questioning the very heart of our economy as it runs now. Join the crowd. Be a crowdfunder of this program by giving as little as $3 a month. You give us a regular income that we can rely on. And you're also doing your bit in an ecosystem of independent media that really relies on a few to provide free quality programming to the many. Thanks for doing your part. Your support is crucial. If you've yet to become a partner, do it. The water is warm. And if you want to make a one-time donation, you can do that at our website too. That's lauraflanders.org/donate. Thanks for listening. Thanks for doing your part. This show's produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, with Jeannie Hopper, Nat Needham, David Newman, Rory O'Connor, Sabrina Artel, and Jeanette Hernandez. Major funding for this program is provided by the Novo, Park, Ellen Poss Family, Hisuku Wilson Foundations, the Schumann Media Center, Rising Fund at Tides, Kim Connor and Nick Groombridge, Jane Fonda, and listeners like you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for your ideas. Stay kind. Stay curious. Until the next time, I'm Laura.